Hi, and welcome to Healthitarian Living. On this episode, I will be sharing with you how to freeze kale. As you may already know, kale is a super healthy, very beneficial, and just all-around wonderful food source. But this is not just unique to kale alone. All leafy greens are outstanding in terms of their value for our health, healing, protection, and prevention. And in fact, all fruits and vegetables are. Diets based on high amounts of fruits and vegetables, but especially leafy greens, are optimally healthy, providing optimal healing and prevention. That is really the key here. So part of their nutritional benefits is that they are extremely nutrient dense. That means they're nutrient rich or have lots of nutrients for very little calories. So this makes them ideal to eat in large amounts, which is what we want for best results anyway. Kale, like leafy greens, is highly anti-inflammatory, highly alkalizing, helping to offset the acidity and problems and damage caused by acidity in our body. It is also non-mucus forming and helps to clean our bodies out. In fact, it's excellent for cleansing and detoxification benefits. It is also high in fiber, and as part of its nutritional composition, kale is a superstar when it comes to providing us with healthy carbohydrates, also providing us a whopping and excellent amount of protein, and is naturally ultra low in fat. Kale, like all leafy greens, provides an outstanding amount of vitamins and minerals, tons of vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin K, and all the other minerals that we also want in our diets as well. And finally, of course, it is packed with antioxidants and phytonutrients. And so while it is best to enjoy kale in its fresh, local, and organic form as much as possible, if you live in a northern climate like myself, then you know that you can't always have access to fresh, local, and or organic kale. This is where we can tap into the wonderful growing season for gathering and preserving as much kale as we can. And then you can have a freezer full of kale to use throughout the months that it would not be available in its most ideal form. Get your kale either from your own homegrown kale or from a local farmer that you trust, like at a farmer's market or perhaps your local CSA program. You can start gathering these and freezing it in batches right really from anywhere from early summer to middle summer and right into the early fall, especially if you can get your hands on large amounts of organic, fresh, local kale and have it also ready for you for when it's not available. Now, what kind of kale can you freeze? Any variety really is just fine. This means you can freeze curly kale, the pretty much most typical kale that we see around. You can also freeze Russian kale like I have out here today. You can also freeze dinosaur kale. Kale is again one of those really great hardy greens that can actually forego early frost and be actually growing in your garden for quite a long time into the early winter. And so it also freezes really well, and that's part of what makes it such a good food to freeze. If your kale is homegrown, it is best to pick the leaves early in the day. For example, first thing in the morning is ideal, especially on hot summer days. You don't want to be picking it while the sun is out or it's a very hot day, as the leaves won't be at their optimum. You will want to wash or clean off your kale in some way. And this will depend very much. For example, if it rained heavily, a lot of soil can be sprayed up on the leaves. In other cases, for example, in the middle of summer, if it's homegrown kale, you may find a lot of different insects living in, on, or around the kale. After washing your kale, shake off as much of the excess water as possible. What I do typically is then lay out my kale after it's been washed early in the day on a towel of some sort in the kitchen and just allow the water, any excess water really, to dry off naturally. Now, you don't want to leave it out for too long as the leaves will start to wilt, especially depending on the type of day. So usually by lunchtime, I would be then getting ready to bag it for freezing. When it comes to bagging it, the most important thing really is to get a high quality freezer bag that has a good Ziploc component. There are various quality bags on the market, and some of them really are so flimsy that the bags don't really close well, especially if you pack the bag really well, as we would like to do to maximize the amount of kale that you are freezing. And so how you place your kale into your bags will very much depend on really how you'd like to use it once it is time for it to be used. In my case, for example, I use the frozen kale strictly for green smoothies. So to me, it doesn't matter so much if they have some of the stalk or if they are in big pieces or if they're shredded up. Now, if you would like to have your kale, frozen kale, for example, for some kind of a dish, kind of like a steamed curry of some sort, then you would want to perhaps strip the leaf off the stalk and then perhaps chop the kale as finely as you would like, and then drop that into the bag, and then it's all ready to be used. Because once the kale thaws, it's not going to be very ideal. You can still do it, but it's not as ideal to chop it at that point. It's best to just remove it and put it on your pan or into your pot, etc. So if you are freezing your kale, for example, like me, for green smoothies, then you have the choice of keeping the stalk on or off, and it really depends most on the power of your blender. Like if you have a Vitamix, for example, then you could keep the stalk on. I used to freeze my kale pretty much always with the stalk, but I found that the stalks really did get in the way for various reasons. One of the reasons is that you can actually pack way more of your kale leaves per bag if you have the stalks off. So I'll give you an example here of how this process would go. Basically, I would be, as I shared with you, stripping the leaf off and then laying it flat in my bag. And the process can be really quite fast, as once you get going, it goes really quite easily. And so here is all our kale. Now imagine you saw the huge pile of kale leaves that was just here a few minutes ago, and that has all fit in one large freezer bag. And that's what's so wonderful, again, if we take off all of those stalks, is that you can fit it all in here. So what's next? Well, once you've got it to this stage, and really again, there's no art to it, you can layer them, you can pack them in as you feel you would like. Then what I do is I actually press this bag against, for example, my cupboards, against my body or something, so that I can squeeze out all the air and then start to use the Ziploc to lock the bag up. And that's what it ends up looking like. So notice again, it just keeps getting smaller from this big pile of kale to this big full bag of kale. That's kind of what you get after it is all finished and done. And again, you just want to squeeze out the air, and it actually creates this sort of natural vacuum suction that gets the air out. Once you've got your bag all closed, it's ready to be placed into the freezer. And so here's what it would look like after being properly frozen. Again, it still stays flat, and the kale basically freezes all together into this one big kale chunk. And then you can simply break off a piece, and this is why I love using it, for example, in green smoothies specifically, because it doesn't matter to me what the leaves, what state they're in, etc. I just break off a chunk, put that into my blender, and that's all there is to it. If you are going to be using it for your stir fry, for example, or like a steamed dish, then you can still break off that chunk, but that's where it would be more helpful if you have the kale chopped up into those smaller pieces as you would most prefer. And the frozen kale can then stay in your freezer for at least, or plus or minus, about 6 months. You can keep it a bit longer. It's not that it's going to go bad, but you don't want to keep these fresh, nutrient-dense, rich foods frozen for too long. Basically, you'd like to use them sooner rather than later. What I find, for example, is that the amount of kale I freeze from my own growing in the garden, and if for any reason there's not an overabundance of kale like I usually have, then I also top it up at my local farmer's market to make sure basically that I have enough frozen kale to last me for any of my winter needs right up into April, because the fresh greens for me don't start coming out till May. So I'd like to be fully equipped with the best that I can get, rather than, for example, non-organic or non-local kale that isn't even fully green and comes from such far away places. And so be sure to tap into the goodness of foods like kale in your diet as much as you can. There's so many things you can do with kale, of course, green smoothies being just one of the most amazing things. And you can prolong having this amazing, fresh, local, organic food source in your diet by freezing it. Thanks for watching, and until next time.